Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Roker Rapport podcast. It's Gav once again in the host chair, joined by Craic and Rich on the other side of the camera. Lads, how we doing? Are we well?
Aye, not so bad. Been a interesting day full of good news. So
yeah. Been a canny day, Craic, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a quick turnaround, hasn't it? Which is very uncharacteristic of Sunderland. We traditionally leave things dragging on for a couple of weeks, but it's nice to see everything getting wrapped up so quickly. So yeah, really good day.
Yeah, so starting the day, well, maybe not starting the day, but the first bit of good news today was, of course, Aidan McGeady back in the squad for the weekend, which was then followed up with the announcement that Kristjaan Speakman, worst kept secret ever, but this guy's the new sporting director in charge of the football inside the operation at the club, and then the news, expected news afterwards of Lee Johnson's appointment, the former Bristol City manager, as head coach. Immediate reaction, Rich, to that flurry of news. I mean, let's leave McGeady out of it. Mainly the two big appointments that have been made by the club. What do you make? What do you make of it? Are you impressed?
I'm impressed, particularly with Kristjaan Speakman. I've done a bit of research on him, and he looks really, really good. His interview with the club that was released this evening was fantastic. And what it does for me is it gives us a long-term vision. It gives us a bit of stability, a bit of structure. And from everything that he was saying in that interview, it seems like he's fully on board with this new project. Yeah. And he was using that term quite a lot, calling it a project, talking about the new ownership group, and how he wants to really revolutionise how Sunderland operates behind the scenes on the footballing side, which is absolutely, music to my ears. Particularly the focus on youth development and bringing people through into the first team squad is absolutely what we wanted. I think we've all been talking about it for months now. How frustrating it is that we've got an academy, a Cat 1 academy, and it doesn't seem to result in quality first team players coming through. And then when it comes to Johnson, I think I'm glad they've got a manager who is more of a coach than a manager. I'm glad they've got somebody who doesn't want to dominate the whole club and run it from top to bottom. I think that's been my fear with some of the names mentioned over the last week is they're big personalities, huge personalities in some cases, and they'd want everything done their way from top to bottom. We had we had Danny Cowley quotes from him saying how he likes to go in and audit the whole club. I'm not sure that that's what we require at this point. I think that's Speakman's role, and what we need is a quality first team coach to work with him, work under him, be appointed by him. And so hopefully with Johnson we've got that. No, I'm very positive about it.
Talk's cheap though, isn't it? It's a case of we said all the right things, Craic. There's going to be some supporters maybe aren't sure what to make of all of this news. I think, as people will have seen, there's been quite a lot of negativity coming the way of the Birmingham City fans and a little bit from Bristol fans who maybe got to their end of that tether with Johnson. But I mean, how do you feel about it all? Is this ultimately positive news in your eyes? Are you sceptical or what?
Well, I mean, admittedly, I don't know an awful lot about Speakman coming in, so I'll hold my hands up and say that. However, it is something that we have been crying out for at least the last, kind of couple of years under Stuart Donald's reign, haven't we? We've been saying that we need to head for that more modern approach. When Jack Ross came in, he was screaming out for somebody to report to a director of football because he felt that there was literally nobody above him on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you're going to run football operations and you've got Jack Ross kind of single-handedly dealing with that, then inevitably stuff like that will always fail. So I think it's certainly a positive step in the right direction. And, we can kind of touch on some of the negativity and stuff like that. I think what we've got to now do is try and re-establish and forge that identity to say that we're going to bring these people in to play the way we want them to play. This is going to be a Sunderland way. I know that the Cowleys were a bit of a popular hit amongst the fans on Twitter and stuff like that, but it's as you've said, they want to come in and do their own thing. What we're now looking to do is we're basically looking to rip up the script, start again and say, this has to be a Sunderland identity. So if it's a case, for argument's sake, that, say, Lee Johnson is very successful and inevitably gets picked off, that we can bring in another manager of a similar calibre and we don't need to flip the switch and start again, because how many times and how many managers and how many regimes have we had that now? Even if it's just something as small as going from like Jack Ross to Parkinson.
Yeah.
They didn't play the same way. And we can't have that. What we need now is we need to have everybody singing from the same hymn sheet. And look, whilst I understand there is obviously going to be reservations because of the people who've appointed them, and I totally get that, because so far under the regime of Madrox, pretty much everything has gone tits up, hasn't it? You know, that I don't think that can be defended. The Jack Ross appointment, yeah, pros and cons, fair enough. Parkinson was an absolute disaster. Then there's been other appointments in the background as well, which have all been terrible, really. But you know what you've got to hope here now is try and have the smallest amount of optimism, just to hope that this supposed new regime, again, because this is all, you know, pre-takeover, nothing's been fully finalised or confirmed as of yet. But you've just got to hope that these guys are now trying to put this identity in place, and if Speakman's going to be spearheading that, then, you know, I'm fully behind it. Like I said, I don't know an awful lot, but if he's getting a glowing reference from someone like Jude Bellingham on Twitter, who's just had a 30-40 million pound move to Borussia Dortmund, and he's been responsible for his development, then I'm well on board with that.
Yeah, I'd be, to be honest, and people who listen to this and read our stuff might be aware, but it's something it's a drum I've been banging for a long time. I just think Sunderland have to become academy centric, and it was music in my ears, to be honest, when I was listening to Speakman talk about it. He sounds very passionate about making that pathway from the youth setup to the first team work. And to be honest, I can't remember a time in my life as a Sunderland fan where we've actually had that. I mean, we've obviously developed some good players, Pickford, Henderson, but we were talking about this earlier in our chat. Like, Jordan Henderson probably came into Sunderland's academy 22 years ago. Although youth set up, you think he was probably 8-year-old or something. He'll have been a young lad when he came. So we're talking about players who actually entered the setup a very long time ago. And there has been a clutch of successes there with Sunderland, but nothing where you could say this is our clear identity to get those players into the first team. And I'm a little bit worried that that's maybe why we've struggled to hold on to some of these players, because ultimately there's what are we selling to young players at Sunderland? What have we in the past? What's the big sell to stay with Sunderland or come to Sunderland? There is nothing. Where now we have somebody running the football side of the club who's in his very first interview come out and said, this is the way I'm going to work. This is what we're going to do at Sunderland, and it's going to be a project that gets young players into the first team. I mean, that to me is everything. Rich, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've listened to the PDP podcast with Speakman a few times.
Sorry, just to butt in, but yeah, if people want to pick up on that, there's a good podcast from, I think, about a year and a half ago, isn't it?
No, it was from last December, I think it was, and it's linked
still
on
very
the
relevant,
article.
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And what was interesting about that was how he was talking about everything they do to make sure that a player is prepared to join the first team. You know, they've got this policy of having 5 academy players in the first team squad at all times, which is really good because it allows everyone to know somebody who's already in the first team, already been in and around the first team. But also what they do is they'll bring young players into the first team dressing room for a match day experience. You know, they'll train on the pitch before the match. They'll not be playing, they're not on the bench, but they go through everything. So when eventually they do get to that stage, that it's not a shock for them.
Right.
But what was also interesting about what he said, and I think Jude Bellingham was the example he used, Jude didn't need that. He just went straight in. You know, he had the attitude that he's been the top of his class, you know, top of his age group all the way through, and he just flew straight into the first team and then out after 40-odd games to Borussia Dortmund, whereas someone like Demarai Gray hadn't always been at the top of his age group, and he was a bit of a later developer. Mm-hmm. And someone like that might have needed a little bit of blooding into the first team setup. But obviously Demarai Gray's gone on and, you know, won the Premier League. So it's really interesting. I think he's from an educational background, and he's all focused on developing the individual talents of players, not treating everyone the same, taking a really empathetic approach and dealing with the individual and what their development needs are. So all of that is fantastic stuff from my perspective. So yeah, I'm really positive, particularly about the Speakman appointment.
Yeah.
I think he's really good for the club.
Yeah, I think we should maybe address some of the concerns and criticisms head on then. So one of the big ones with Lee Johnson I've seen from fans is the nickname that he earned as a manager at Bristol City was Streaky Lee or Streaky Johnson, something along those lines. Mainly because he used to go on big winless runs and then big winning runs. Is that something we should worry about, Craic? I mean, the first thing when I saw that, the first thing that made me think of was Steve Bruce. I used to just remember those big long runs where he used to go on under him. And I mean, it was entertaining, but then it could be very depressing at the same time. And can we read much into that? Is that something that follows a manager? Because, did that happen at Barnsley or Oldham? I've got no idea. It's a funny one. It is the most commonly suggested criticism that I've seen of him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, for anybody who follows like George Ellick on Twitter, the lad from Not the Top 20, and to be fair, if you want any sort of indication if somebody's going to be a success in the Football League, I'd probably encourage most people to listen to them. He put something on his Twitter feed basically saying if you're wanting to stop the 1-1s, Streaky Lee is your man, but he goes on to say that he thinks it's a good appointment and it's an exciting project for him. He says that he's clearly a talented manager and coach. It's a good start and he can see this going very well, and it feels like the right people will be calling the shots, and essentially that's what you've just got to kind of hope from here. What I would say is in respect of, kind of managers, I think everybody's going to have a little bit of baggage wherever they go, aren't they? I'll always remember seeing something on Sky Sports when Steve Bruce got appointed as the Newcastle manager, and there was this bloke effing and blinding kicking off, and he was saying, look at his record, he's been sacked, resigned, how else can you leave a football club? So unless you say like Pep Guardiola, somebody is always going to have an X on the record. I mean, Christ, Jose Mourinho at the top of the Premier League, Spurs at the moment, and he's been sacked from his last 3 or 4 jobs. But with Lee Johnson, I mean, again, for a lot of people who don't know an awful lot, obviously you went out and sourced an interview, a Q&A with a Bristol City fan.
Yeah.
One True Robin, the Bristol City blog, I'd probably refer people to that as well, because, he's kind of addressed a couple of my concerns straight away. He was referencing that the switch to 4 at the back, which is something that I've been very, very kind of pro about for the last couple of weeks. Even if we have a look back at that Burton game the other night, I think that change of formation all of a sudden gave us we took the handbrake off somewhat and we start to play with a bit more freedom. And that's what I want. I want somebody to come in and have that relentless desire and get the best attacking quality out of the side, because I know people will say an awful lot, but this side's still got enough to get promoted.
Oh,
everybody's beating each other. And the squad depth that we've got, if we're bringing McGeady back into the fold as well, so I think he's got a lot to work with. I know obviously there's been concerns about, these long runs and stuff like that, but like I said, I think we've got enough in the tank for him to come in and work with that I honestly believe that he can get the best out of them. I will not go in, kind of 2-footed straight away and say he's going to be the biggest success ever, because, look, we can't predict that. But I honestly believe, even with Phil Parkinson in charge, this side could have got promoted. What he needed to do is he needed to back himself a bit more. He needed to have a bit more desire and a bit more conviction and believe he could go win games. I think with somebody like Lee Johnson, because they've been managing around the top end of the Championship, he's not going to want to settle in League One, especially if he comes for a club the size of Sunderland. So I honestly believe he'll come in, he'll give it a bit of a shake-up, and look, it's early doors, but I'm still convinced that come the end of the season we'll get promoted. But he's just got to come in and get us off to a good start.
That's the main thing, like getting off to a good start and just stamping some authority, because one thing that we can all agree on is the football's been shite all season. And one of the big ticks in the box, I guess, next to his name, from a Bristol perspective anyways, is that his teams play a decent football. So fingers crossed this is the start of, maybe some better performances coming up.
There's been a lot of mentions as well, though, just in terms of how many of the youth players and things like that he brings through, and that's something that we've been crying out for now. If we go goal down, how many times do you see on the socials people are saying, right, get Dan Neil on, or get Jack Diamond on, or get Elliot Embleton on? We have that strength and depth. People are now saying, obviously, some of them are perhaps a little inexperienced, but if we can kind of tie that up somewhat now, if we can get Speakman and we can get Lee Johnson to work from the same page, and make sure, as Rich mentioned earlier, that they are that well equipped so they can just drop into the team and they're not going to have any, sort of run of lack of form or anything, that they can just fit in immediately, then, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you would expect hopefully everything should go okay. But this is Sunderland, isn't it?
No, this is Sunderland, yeah.
We'll bookmark this for when he gets sacked 6 months from now, but no, I'm happy with it.
The other sort of little grey cloud hanging over it, Rich, I would say, is that nobody really, I don't think anyone saw it coming, did they really? He wasn't one of the highly, he wasn't linked particularly highly, was he? Coming into maybe the last day or so he has been. The bookies, I think he was second, which if anyone listened to this from the Ready to Go forum, would like to know, is the reason why I sourced a Bristol City fan to try and find out more about him. Not because somebody from the football club told us to. Yeah, he was second favourite with the bookies yesterday, but sort of came out of nowhere. We don't actually know too much at this stage about how he was recruited, but it sounds as though there was some sort of interview process. But regardless, is there much we can read into that? That maybe people didn't see it coming, and maybe that he isn't... see, when people were guessing names of managers who could come to Sunderland, it reminds us a little bit, and I'm not comparing him to Parkinson as a manager, but maybe a bit like Parkinson when nobody really saw that coming, did they? Is there anything we can read into that, Rich? Because I mean, I'll say no, but I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Well, we can't read much more than we don't own a football club, or and we're not part of the recruitment process.
And can I just add, it probably shows that, one, we know a lot less than we think collectively, and two, that most of the crap that turfs up in the papers and on Twitter and stuff, you're best off ignoring until something actually happens. Because I mean, they would have had Nigel Pearson and Super Kevin in charge, wouldn't they? Had it been for social media.
Everyone's got their favourites, haven't they?
Yeah.
Everyone's got an opinion on who they would have brought in. I mean, there've been lots of names bandied about. You know, club legends. We've had, you know, some pretty ridiculous suggestions. We've had some pretty sound suggestions as well. I think Pearson would have been a brilliant appointment. I'm just not sure he's looking for a job in League One at the minute. And I also think he's another one of these managers who'd want to come in and make the whole ship his own. He wants to be the only captain on the ship. So yeah, I think when it comes to like the speculation and stuff and how we go about choosing managers, this is, as Speakman said, part of a project, and that project, it's a whole, and this is just one part of it. And so I think the most important criteria really has been the ability for to find the right man to fit into that structure, who's not going to disrupt that structure, but who can really excel within it, and where it will suit their style. And again, I think Johnson seems to tick all of those boxes. But I mean, I can't say I'm an expert on Lee Johnson. I've got Bristol City supporting family who were not overly impressed with the appointment of him going to Sunderland, because I think some of the other fans that we've spoken to said, I think they've run out of patience with him by last summer. But I can't be negative about it at this stage. I think I'm glad I wasn't the one making the choice. No, to be frank, because I probably would have balls it up royally. Yeah,
well, let's just touch on the obviously he was the leading contender along with Danny Cowley, we believe. So Cowley, a completely different type of manager, a young man just like Johnson, obviously, but completely different type of manager. He plays a probably more direct style of football. He's actually famed for it. Hasn't managed a particularly long spell in the Championship. He didn't even complete a season with Huddersfield. He came in after a bad start of their season and then was sacked just before the end, I think. But Cowley was the other leading contender. So obviously we know we've got Johnson now, Craig. But are you happy knowing that? Say it was one or the other. Are you happy with Johnson, or would you have minded Cowley? Or I mean, I know it's semantics at this stage. It doesn't really matter. But obviously, if those were the two choices and the club have decided to go with Lee Johnson, is that a good move or a bad move? Or is it too early to say?
It's probably far too early to say. But I think in respect of kind of what you both were mentioning about, all these names banded about, it does kind of really show that, not a lot of people really know what is going on. And I think, in fairness to whoever is made the decision, that they've probably kept the cards very close to the chest, because it was Poyet at the start of the week, and I know everybody's got caught up in the whirlwind of getting back, start the Gus bus, this, that and the other. And I think we all probably had a bit of excitement around him coming back, and then obviously there was, suggestions of why he didn't want to. I think at that stage, because Lee Johnson hadn't been mentioned at all, I was probably very pro Cowley's at that stage, with admittedly not knowing an awful lot about them. Just perhaps like an awful lot, just looking at the record and going, well, look, they've got Lincoln from A to B, playing pretty good football. And obviously you look at the Huddersfield side of things. What was reported with them, of course, is why they got let go by Huddersfield, is apparently that they were wanting to go for a similar approach, which we now are adopting, and they didn't fit the mould. So with that in mind, it's probably best to have a look at somebody alternative. If it is Lee Johnson, there still could be better candidates out there who may have been a better manager or a better fit than him. But if we're looking to go for this particular plan now, then yeah, I mean, like I said, I've got no concerns with it at this stage. I mean, you would always sincerely hope and give your best to whoever comes in. And look, I know people are listening, they'll say this, that and the other, but yeah, we've got concerns about what's going on with the ownership, but we can only give our best to the manager. And I honestly believe, and I've said it so many times this year, I think a lot of people would come into this football club and do better with the current resources than Phil Parkinson. And at this moment, I'm backing Lee Johnson to do that.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much what I said on Twitter earlier today, was that just from the brief sort of conversations I've had with Bristol City fans on him, we can at least ascertain, take the opinion sort of thing out of it. Is he a good manager? Is he good at this? Is he bad at this? Whatever. His teams play good football. He highly favours youth players. He likes the use of data and analytics. That automatically makes him a better choice for the job for me than Phil Parkinson. So in that sense, it is a good move. Obviously, time will tell whether he's a good appointment or not. We can't sit here and say with any degree of certainty whether he's perfect for Sunderland or whether he's going to be a bad manager. I mean, time will tell. Time will tell, and hopefully he hits the ground running. I want to scale back quickly, Rich, just to something about Speakman again. In the statement on the club website, they're pretty clear in what his sort of role's going to be going forward. It says Speakman will lead SAFC's overall football programme, including player identification, development and acquisitions across the first team and academy. Working alongside Chief Executive Officer Jim Rodwell, he will also take primary responsibility for reviewing and implementing new strategies to develop the club's football and infrastructure, with an emphasis on data analytics and innovation, and providing a clear pathway from the younger age groups to the first team. Now, obviously, those are all things we sort of touched on. The big take from that would be that he's working alongside Jim Rodwell. A lot of people weren't sure whether Rodwell would survive the change of ownership, which is impending and about to happen. Looks as though, reading that, Jim Rodwell's here to stay.
Aye.
Your take on that? Is there anything we can read too much into that?
No, I think you're reading into it what I read into it, reading that statement, and that was a surprise, I have to say. I think all of the fan base have kind of expected if and when this takeover goes through, and this looks very much more like a when with Speakman's appointment and some of the things he was saying in his video interview. But I think we were expecting a bit of a clean slate in terms of the management of the club day to day. So with that statement, it does sound like Rodwell's not going anywhere. He has spoken with. I thought he was quite good on the Unfiltered podcast with Frankie and Danny. I thought he spoke really well and eloquently about the club and about the future of the club. But then, he hasn't covered himself in glory earlier in the pandemic with the season ticket issue and some of the other issues at the club. So he's not not going to be my favourite person because of that, because that put a lot of stress on fans, and I thought there was a little bit more that the club could have done there. But it was a difficult time for everyone. So I read exactly the same into that as you, that he's not going anywhere and that he's going to work really closely with Speakman. And I also thought it was interesting from Speakman's interview, him talking about appointing a head of recruitment in the next few days, and that being a really key appointment alongside the manager.
Yeah.
Do you get the feeling? Sorry for butting in, but do you get the feeling that they've just kind of thought now, say 2 years down the road, that nobody's going to buy for the valuation that they want? They're obviously trying to bring somebody with a thicker wallet to the table, but they've looked at it and thought, you know what, we've made a right mess of what we've done so far. These are foundations that if they put in place, say 2 years ago, speculating, but maybe we could have been top half of the championship. We could have kept the riches of our academy with some of these young lads, your Greenwoods and Mumbers and Logan Pye and all of these young lads. So from that perspective, that's where I'm kind of very much on the fence in terms of getting myself overly excited. I think, look, we'll all hold our hands up and say we're all got. I don't like saying we've got conned or anything like that, because the way that the Ellis Short regime, come to an end, when people came into the club and started, giving you suggestions of what was going to happen, it of course was going to be like music to your ears, because they were coming in to say, like, we're going to fix all this, and they didn't deliver it on it. Pretty much none of it. So with that in mind, that's why you can understand that there is a lot of, skeptical people out there. I know people are leveling accusations of saying, well, people have got agendas and people are doing this, that, and the other. But I think at this point, it's probably worth maybe taking into consideration. And I think people should have a bit of a nuance about this, because I think there's certainly a lack of that at the moment. People are going to have different opinions, of course. At the moment, like I said, I'm more or less just sat back waiting for the next stages to unfold, because, it was only, 10, 11 months ago where we were telling these owners to get out of our football club. And in all those months that's gone by now, we know that nothing's materialised. It doesn't look like a clean slate is going to be happening anytime soon in respect of Madrock's leaving. So I think the only thing that we can really do at this stage is hope and pray. And like I said, just kind of touching on your comments, I honestly thought that Rodwell would have went out the door. Again, I think it was a very much a jobs for the boys appointment. I would love nothing more for, the proposal of the Americans coming back in and giving us this clean break. But for the moment, at least, it's not going to happen. And I respect that there's going to be people who have different views. There's people who've got them weird extreme views of wanting William Story to take charge of the club. But for the moment, this is the very best of a bad situation. We're going to have to like it and lump it. We can't force anybody out.
No.
We can't even get in the ground to air our displeasure. So it's probably worth people not taking shots at each other on the internet or on Twitter and getting overly personal with us. We're all as guilty as each other for wanting the previous regime to succeed. So with this new loss, like I said, we can only hope. And I know it's the hope that kills you, but from here on out, you've just got to trust that this lad Speakman coming in is going to be given a bit of a free rein, and he's not going to be hamstrung where other people have. So if he can come in and start implementing some of the message that he spoke of, then I think hopefully this might be a step in the right direction, because God knows do we need it.
Yeah, it's sensible what you're saying. Go on, Rich.
I think as well, just to reiterate that, really, everyone wants the best for the club. Whether you've been backing William Story's bid, whether you've been wanting FPP to come and take over the club, calling their loan, take over the club, or whether you're pinning your hopes on Louis-Dreyfus coming in and taking a majority share, or at least being in control of the club with Juan Sartori. I think we can make the perfect the enemy of the good. I've said that a few times recently. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. You're never going to get everything that we want out of a football club or out of anything else. And I think we need to be cautiously optimistic and stay sceptical over the next few weeks and months. What's going to be really important is them outlining their plans to the fans.
Yeah.
Speakman did talk about that in his video interview this evening. Talked about talking to fan forums, being clear and open about what the plan is, what the structure is going to be. And I think that's absolutely crucial for the club. There isn't too much information that they can put out there about who's going to be involved, why, what they're going to be doing, what the relationships and boundaries between those roles are, what the plan for this year, 3 years' time, 5 years' time is going to be. And again, Speakman was hinting at that this evening in terms of saying, no, we do want to be a top Premier League club, a top half of the Premier League club, but we want to go up this season, and then we've got to consolidate in the Championship. So it's a sensible, progressive, step-by-step approach. People need to be patient, but we've also got to be really sceptical. Keep asking the questions. Keep demanding that they live up to what they promised and what they're meant to do in terms of meeting with fan groups and doing that properly. And and not cancelling things and not holding meetings for a year, that kind of thing, because you've fallen out with one director. That can't be the way that the relationship goes, or it's just going to stay with everyone arguing with each other over tiny little points and everyone being suspicious of one another within fan groups and within fan, everyone on Twitter, everyone on Facebook, because that's where we talk to each other at the minute. We're not in ground yet.
Yeah.
It's the only place we're talking to one another as fans. So I just really hope that we keep that kind of skeptical but optimistic vibe going on. That I hope will be the flavour of the day over the next few days and weeks.
One thing which I think's kind of been overlooked a little bit is these are the first big moves made by the people running the club since Richard Hill, Tony Courtnett all left Sunderland. So this is a complete 180 in terms of direction of the football inside of the club, really, isn't it? It's like, we've actually appointed somebody with a proper background in the game to a key role. It's not Stuart Donald's mate from Eastleigh. It's a somebody with a big future in the game. And another thing which I think's quite important that hasn't really been touched on is the respective ages of both Speakman and Johnson. Johnson's 39-year-old and he's been managing since he was 31. I mean, he's a young man with a lot of experience at what he does. Similarly, Speakman started coaching when he was a teenager, and I think, was he at Birmingham 22 years, I think I read? Or 21 years?
I think it was at Birmingham, I think he was 14 years.
14,
I think
sorry.
he was. I think he
He's
was
a
7
Derby
years.
prior,
Derby was from
Yeah.
Derby from 19 till 26. I think he was.
So I wonder.
It's a good point.
I wonder how much that factored into it then, because there can't be many other people who've got that much experience at their age, like to do what they're doing. It is a total shift in approach, isn't it, in terms of bringing in younger people to run the club.
Yeah, and we've got a 22, 23-year-old
Yeah,
majority
obviously, yeah.
shareholder as well, and
Yeah.
and that's maybe all part of it. That
Young
Kirill
men, yeah.
Louis-Dreyfus doesn't want to work with old men. He wants to work with people who are more our age. It's going to be very strange having a manager who's 1 year older than me and a sporting director who's like 3 years older than me. It's a bit weird, really. I've always clung on to the fact that there's still professional footballers playing who are older than me, but that won't be the case.
It would be nice to bring
longer.
it would be nice to bring the average age of the squad down a bit now, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah.
I think that might play a big part in it. In that we're hearing a lot about youth recruitment and academy recruitment, but it's the longer term. They've got to get the average age of that squad down, and they've got to start producing players with sell-on value. I think that's something that's been talked about a lot, Craic, isn't it? Like we've got a club here and we've already touched on this here, but the academy is Cat 1. That gives us a big advantage in negotiations when it comes to signing players and stuff. But ultimately, we've never made the most of it. Like we're still signing players this past summer, like free transfers. Danny Graham and Aidan O'Brien, and I mean, I know Bailey Wright's a good player, but Bailey Wright, there's no resale value in these players, and I just don't think we're going to be making those sort of decisions in the transfer market anymore. I might be wrong, but that's not the impression I'm getting with all of what's coming out and what they're saying. Doesn't sound to me like that's going to be an approach we take going forward, does it?
Well, you'd like to think. I mean, I suppose there's a certain irony in the news that we began to celebrate at the start of the day was Aidan McGeady getting back into the team. And he's, I was going to say, like, our best player being that age, but that does go to show, doesn't it, that we are so heavily reliant on those people. I mean, Christ, when Danny Graham came in, there was, I think a fair few people going, well, look, he scored a lot of goals in the Championship. He might be able to do it at this level. Yeah, I did too, Rich. And look how that's come back and bit us on the arse as well. But, I mean, with that in mind, it is now time that we have somebody with that longevity in them, somebody with a proven track record who's going to come in and improve the academy straight away. I mean, in fairness, it's been nothing more than just a glorified training ground that over the past couple of years has just been... It's been like a puppy farm, hasn't it, really? It's like people have been coming along, watching our games, going, right, we'll take that one and we'll offer you a couple of quid. The suggestion of this appointment maybe gives an indication that is going to stop, you would like to think. Again, purely speculating, I've got nothing to, to kind of form that on at this point. But
sorry, Craig, to put in, but it gives you the impression that when we get in these dogfights with these big clubs, we've got somebody at the top who genuinely cares about keeping the players here.
He was mentioning that in his statement this evening. To be honest, he was saying exactly that. That can't happen anymore.
That must be an advantage that you can maybe tell to the parents as well of these young lads as well. If you're sitting down and having a conversation, because again, it seems to be something rumoured that never took place. There was no conversations from our end to try and say to these young lads, like, look, we want you to stay here because this is your plan. Over the next 2 to 3 years, we'll loan you out. You'll get in the first team this way. We've just basically opened the door and went, right, see you later. But if he can sit down with any of these young kids who potentially have an option to go to Leeds or United, City, Liverpool, and he can actually say, well, look, I kept Jude Bellingham and I got him and moved to Borussia Dortmund or something like that, or that's a pretty decent thing to have on your CV, isn't it, really? Stuff like that. And I mean, admittedly, I'm sure that he's obviously had some players as well where it hasn't worked out, but with a Category 1 academy, there's not many teams, I think there's 15 teams like that have that in the country. And if you've got that, you've got to be making sure that we are fully using that, we are fully resourcing that. So now at this point, it does look, admittedly, 2 years down the line, that there is finally a plan. But like Rich said, I think, whilst we've all got a bit of optimism, we've still got almighty concerns. It would be probably ideal over the course of the next few days, once we hear the first video from Lee Johnson about what sold him to the vision of the new club, and obviously the prospective owners, if this proposed takeover goes through, give us an indication as to what's going on. Speak directly with Red and White Army. by God, do not speak with any of the fan outlets, because you'll get accused of all sorts. But just make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on. Keep that regular dialogue with obviously the appropriate people, and hopefully you shouldn't go wrong. But like I said, this is Sunderland. It's the hope that we can't stand. So we'll wait and see. But I'm cautiously optimistic.
There was another point in the sort of statement, the quotes from Speakman, Rich, where he talks about this season specifically, and we haven't really talked about that yet, particularly with the appointment of Johnson. But he says, "We understand the frustration of the present circumstances, and whilst we seek patience and continue support for longer-term objectives, we are absolutely determined to fix key issues in the short term to establish a winning team. The task of appointing a head coach who is both aligned to the overall plan and capable of impacting the team's performance and style in the immediate weeks and months is a priority above all else." So Johnson then is a manager I don't know a lot about. I listened this week to the Under the Cosh podcast. They had Luke Steele on, who played for him at, I think he might have played for him at Barnsley and Bristol City. Not too sure, but he was. Anyways, it was interesting because this was just before sort of Johnson emerged as a contender. I was listening to the show, and he said even now at whatever age Luke Steele is, that Lee Johnson's still the best manager he's ever played for at getting players going, getting them motivated in the trade. He says he gives the best speeches of any manager I've ever played under, and he played for Sir Alex Ferguson, let's not forget. He said he gives the best speeches in the dressing room of any manager I've ever played under. And that kind of stuck out to me, because I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, well, how often have we spoke in recent times, particularly about how badly Sunderland start the second half of games, and just how the players don't look like they're given anything extra for the manager. That could be huge, really, in giving us that extra 10-15%, couldn't it, for the rest of the season?
Absolutely. We've needed an inspirational leader, and we've just not had one. We've not had one since we've been really. I mean, Jack Ross,
Probably
I think,
Allardyce,
is a good coach, etc. We've not had an inspirational leader for years, and that is important. And I think that's an important attribute of a first team coach in this structure, is that I don't think that Speakman's going to be an inspirational leader. He's going to be he's the kind of leader who brings out the best in other people, and you want Johnson to do that as well, but Speakman's not going to be, cracking the whip, and you're going to need a bit of both. And from what I've heard about Johnson, yeah, he's fiery in the dressing room. He's progressive in his changes. He's not scared to change formations halfway through a game. He's not scared to change players. If anything, he might be a bit overzealous in dropping people after a defeat or a slightly underwhelming performance. But, how many times have we recently been talking about the fact that Parkinson just, you can pick his team 5 days in advance if you know what injuries we've got.
Yeah.
It's dour, dire football. Hopefully, what Johnson will be able to bring pretty quickly, whether he's in charge tomorrow or not, I don't know. It is a bit of inspiration and a bit of tactical nous and flexibility, to be honest, and that players keep players on their toes. There's a bit of that been going on recently as well, where you just see some of the players, like, they're not going to get dropped, and if they get dropped, they know they're going to be back in 2 games' time.
Yeah,
and if you're playing crap after 50 minutes, you're still going to have another 20, even 30 minutes to try and do something. You're not going to get subbed out because you've been playing awful. We've seen that so many times. So yeah, I just a breath of fresh air is what we need, to be honest.
Anything to add, Craig? Have you got any sort of
No,
feelings on that?
I fully agree, and certainly in respect of the comments where it was mentioned that it can potentially be overzealous. I think there has been that sort of complacency there, this lazy thing that's set in with a lot of the players where, it happened with, say, Chris Maguire under Jack Ross. He would just go through the motions. Ross would have the balls to drop him. He'd come in for maybe 2 or 3 games later and he'd be firing all cylinders again. And I think what's important now is that we have somebody who, on that touchline, is not going to be afraid to make some difficult decisions. Somebody who's going to back himself and really lead by example. I mean, I don't want to, kind of lay into Phil Parkinson, because I'm sure, he is probably a really nice bloke, but you never felt that he had that fire in the belly, that relentless drive to come here and succeed. I mean, in his opening presser where he said, yeah, I'm here to get promoted, this, that and the other. But I don't honestly believe afterwards that he had any conviction, to actually think that we were going to get promoted. I think when he struck lucky on well, maybe that's doing a bit of a disservice. When we went on that running winner form from January onwards, you know, we got settled on a formation, got settled on a plan. But even then, it's exactly like what Rich said. You know, things just kind of fell down at the wayside a little bit. Teams cottoned on. They found out what we could do. And he wasn't prepared to make any difficult calls in respect of changing the formation or maybe dropping players for others. And by the end of it, the players were absolutely knackered, burnt out into the ground. And that's what ultimately cost us in those final 4 games. So what I would like from Lee Johnson now is to come in, give everybody a fresh slate. I think that's why Aidan McGeady's now obviously going to be considered from here on out. And just make sure that everybody's on the same page and just to basically say, look, if you aren't pulling your weight, you're out this team. The end product now, we need to make sure that we're not going to have, say, Max Power coming out on a Tuesday night or Bailey Wright coming out and telling us that a draw against a side like Burton Albion is acceptable and try and find positives.
That is massive. There needs to be a total attitude adjustment amongst these players. Like Parkinson has managed to sort of brainwash these players, I think, into thinking these things are all right. Like crazy. That what you've just touched on there. Bailey Wright, who is captain most teams he's played for. Max Power, who's captained a few clubs. These are like lads who they should know what good and bad is. That, I mean, what we've been doing recently is not good. It wouldn't be nice to see a little bit of honesty and maybe a rocket up the backside of the players in the dressing room who have got the most sway within the group.
Yeah, it's not even so much throwing, you know, individuals under the bus from say Max Power there. What he needs to do is front up as the captain and address it as everybody to say we as a team have not been good enough here. We didn't start playing until we went a goal down, until the formation. We shouldn't really need that. So what I would sincerely hope is that somebody like Lee Johnson is going to come in and perhaps have knowledge of those comments and have a look at the league table, pin that up on the wall to say, look, ultimately this is not good enough. You have been playing poorly, hence the reason why the manager has got sacked. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to improve on everything here, and we just need to crack on because, like I said, I think, are we 7th? Are we 8th now? The way that the teams are beating each other in this league, we've got every chance of even still winning the league. Hull haven't had a bad patch yet. I mean, Hull, in respect to them, were one of the worst sides to come up against us so far this season. But like I said, I think the most important thing is now is that we have that change of culture. It's not going to happen overnight, admittedly. We'll start actually addressing, you know, bad things. We'll start holding each other accountable and saying that's not good enough. And I sincerely hope that's going to start over the next couple of days when he gets out on the training pitch. But whether we're going to get that new manager bounce is yet to be seen. But I mean, like I said, it's anything's better than Phil Parkinson at this moment.
Well, let's just round off on a nice positive, I guess. The players who we think might benefit most from working under Lee Johnson, Rich. Is there anybody who comes to mind? Players who maybe didn't get a fair crack of the whip under the last manager, who maybe didn't fit the system that he was sort of impressing on the players. Is there anybody you think who could benefit?
Well, it might be a bit of a cliche and an easy option, but I think Elliot Embleton. I think he's exactly the kind of player who will respond to a manager who can inspire him, who can play him how he needs to be played. I mean, that lad, all right, he hasn't been that effective. He missed a couple of chances the other night, etc. But his quality on the ball, you know, you see the way he shapes his body, you see the way he floats the ball in, even if it isn't accurate. He's got quality on the ball. So I can see how somebody with that talent, someone who is a England age group international, would respond really well to a coach like Lee Johnson. So yeah, that's the lad who I could see really benefit him. And if there's another name who really needs, I think, to take the step to the next level and get out of a little bit of complacency, might be Denver Hume. I think there's things to add to his game. He's obviously got a lot of talent, a lot of quality, but there's things he really needs to add to his game if he's really going to take it to the next level, and that really is his final ball in crossing, although, you know, his cross the other night was lovely, but particularly his finishing, because if you're going to be that flying wing back or that winger, who knows how he might play in a 4-4-2.
Denver Hume, that sticks out a little bit to me because Johnson played a massive part in developing Joe Bryan at Bristol City, who became like a really good attacking left back in the Championship and got like a big money move. Well, I say big money, 6 million, but, you know, a decent move to a Premier League team. It makes us wonder, you know, players. I was trying to think who is the most important player in this team to the sort of output that we produce. And I was thinking about this earlier, and I was thinking it's probably Denver Hume, to be honest, because everything, particularly under Parkinson, comes through him. And although I can't say it's playing the same way under Johnson, it just made us think, there's a lad who, comparatively, there was a player at Bristol City who played the same position and done very, very well. Does he stand to do well in this team? I mean, he is already doing well for Sunderland. But of course, there's plenty of players in the squad who I think could probably do all right. Another point would be to look maybe at strikers. I'm not saying our strikers are in any way comparative to the ones that Johnson's had at Bristol City. But Grigg is just something waiting to happen, isn't it? Like, everyone's sort of sitting around waiting for Will Grigg to come good at Sunderland. If there's anybody needs a fresh start more than him, then I don't know who they are in our team, because he is the one player who you can look at and think, if someone could just come in and get their arm around him and play in a way that gets the best from him, we could strike lucky. I don't know, does anyone have that feeling with Grigg, or is his time up? Because, go on, Craig.
Yeah, I'm fully in agreement with that. I think one of the biggest issues with Will Grigg that he's had, look, by everybody's opinions, he's had a shit time here, hasn't he? He cost us too much money, we know that. It was a bit of a mental sign in the way it all unfolded. But every time he seems to get into the team, I mean, I can't remember, I think it was the MK Dons game where he missed the open goal. He gets dropped immediately. When, say, Danny Graham was missing chances like that, or Charlie Wyke's missing chances like that, they seem to get that continued run in the team. They seem to get the chances to put it right. Will Grigg's never been afforded that, I don't think. When he came on the other night, what I thought was interesting is when we changed formation somewhat, hits the post with his first effort, quite unlucky with the second effort, fair enough, but I think that's what he needs. And again, I appreciate people go, well, they paid lots of money, this, that and the other, they shouldn't need the help and the support, this, that and the other, but they're just human at the end of the day. And I think we can all say if we're having a bit of a shit run at work, or we're having bad goings on or elsewhere, it's going to impact us, and it's going to have a serious effect. So I would sincerely hope that with Lee Johnson's kind of a attacking outlet, that he's going to come in and say, hey, listen, you've had a bit of a bad time here. You are quite clearly capable of doing it. You've got Wigan promoted a couple of times. I'm kind of just getting ahead of myself. He just needs to have that spark again. I think that's what he needs. He needs somebody to tell him that he can do it, because I think under Phil Parkinson, it doesn't seem like there's been any of what you've mentioned so far of that arm around him. I'm just going to kind of quickly go off subject slightly, but I remember speaking to Chris Coleman when we'd done the podcast with him in the summer, and one thing that he said was that there was a lot of issues with the players, mentally, that was impacting them and affecting them. And I think for a club the size of Sunderland, a lot of these players aren't going to play at a club the size of this ever again. So maybe the expectations are going to be slightly overwhelming to them. And I think that has perhaps hampered Will Grigg, knowing that he's got to try and repay some of that massive fee. So the way I look at it now is, if somebody can say, hey, listen, don't worry about the £4 million transfer fee, I'm going to get the best out of you, and here's my plans for you, then I think that he has got a chance. I know his contract's dwindling out, and the reality is we've probably just got to let him go, because there's no way we're going to get our money back. But until that day happens, we've got to try and get some value out of him, and I'm hoping that Lee Johnson's going to be the man to do it.
Rich, were you wanting to step in there?
Well, yeah, it was more just to add about Grigg, really. Again, that a change of style and a change of formation may well do a lot from him. I know that under Jack Ross, he wasn't living up here, he didn't settle. A lot of that might have changed over the summer, etc. But Parkinson's style never suited him. And the one thing from the other night, when he came on, he was deeper than the other striker, and he played that nice ball through to Danny Graham's feet. And I thought, maybe he needs to be playing up front in a two, where he can drop off sometimes, and where he can find space, where he can be part of the link-up play, 1-2s, get in behind. There's none of that through the middle, or there hasn't been with Parkinson. So hopefully with Johnson being a bit more of a free-flowing football kind of manager, that, well, we need to create more chances. And that has been, they've been living off scraps, particularly Grigg has been living off scraps. He gets one chance. Strikers sometimes need 2, 3, 4 chances in a game. He gets one, and like Craig said, he misses, he's out the side. And then his second choice sub coming on after 80-odd minutes rather than 70-odd minutes, So yeah, he could be rejuvenated, we'd hope.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that can be said about the whole club. Everything can be rejuvenated. We all sound rather optimistic, but like you said earlier, maybe cautious optimism is probably the best approach to take, because with all of this, there is the possibility that everything can go tits up, and we are Sunderland, and we're used to seeing everything go tits up. But of course, we're fans. We're all fans. That's often forgotten about with people who have podcasts and blogs and all the rest of it. We're just fans who want to see the club do well. And if we say, we're quite happy with the appointment of Johnson, or we're looking forward to seeing what he can do, doesn't mean we're being paid by the club to do it. It doesn't mean that anybody's asked us to say that. I just want to see my club do well, and I can't help feeling quite happy about the fact that something's changing. We called for months, and some people called for almost a year for the replacement of Phil Parkinson as manager. We've got that done. Everyone, I say everybody, but most people wanted a change in ownership. All right, we're not seeing a total change in ownership, but what we are seeing is going to bring some effective change within the club. So we're getting that at least. We've got rid of Donald and Co. They've got no sort of say day to day by the looks of it. These guys are going to be running the football side. That has to be another tick in the right in the positive column. So all I'm trying to say is, whilst yes, let's stay very cautiously optimistic on all of this. If you do feel a little bit happy about this, and you do feel as though things might be turning a corner at Sunderland, and that ultimately we're headed for a better place, then that's okay. You're allowed to feel that way, and it doesn't make you a sympathiser of the ownership. It just makes you a Sunderland fan who wants to see the best for that club. But yeah, I don't know if anybody has anything else to add. But ultimately, all I want to say to our listeners is we hope we've been able to bring a little bit of perspective to what's going on at the club. I'm sure more will come out over the coming days. I won't make a secret of the fact that we've recorded this before the actual appointment of Lee Johnson's been confirmed, but it has pretty much been confirmed, hasn't it? We all know it's coming as per media sort of leaks and what have you. So that's why we've chosen to talk about this tonight. But yeah, I'm sure as the weeks progress, we'll have more to say about what he does. And as Craic said maybe 10 minutes or so ago, it's going to be good to see what he can do once he gets out on the pitch with the players and really starts to stamp his authority. And hopefully, as Kristjaan Speakman alluded to, he's able to have the short-term impact on the team and the results that we need to really turn the season around, because God knows that we have to get out of this league this season regardless of what happens anywhere else. So yeah, thanks lads for joining us, and of course we'll catch everyone else after the game. Wigan, catch you later.